I'm gonna introduce you, and I'll let you talk a little bit about yourself. Hi, everybody. My name is Pedro Crespo. I am the operations manager here at GSD Solutions. And I'm happy to be here today with Natalie Simmons from Zog Culture. Thank you for being here, Natalie. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing very well. Happy to be here too. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Sunny San Francisco today.
Love a sunny
So,
San Francisco.
yeah,
Not
how's the
always the
weather?
case.
How's the weather where you're at?
It's beautiful. I'm actually in Las Vegas, and it is. I think it's always sunny in Las Vegas and hot. So yeah, it's nice.
Really, when was the last time it rained there?
I don't know. It's a desert, so probably not often.
Not often, yeah.
Yeah.
So, Natalie, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me what you do at Zog Culture.
Sure. So I am senior manager of accounts and operations at Zog Culture, which is all to say that I oversee our accounts team who works closely with our clients, as well as our operations team who develops all of our product and works with our staff and creates all the fun things that we offer for companies to be able to do with their employees. So we're a virtual events company. Actually, we're a virtual and in-person events company with the mission of creating connections and building community through playful experiences at work.
And I'm guessing that it was a bit hard transferring those skills from in person to the virtual world, right?
Yeah, so kind of the history of Zog or Zog culture is that we probably started around five. I joined the company 3 years ago, but we started 5 to 6 years ago, and it was out of a need from companies and ask from companies to create like fun, sporty experiences for their employees in person because they found that, play is this beautiful connector of people and it kind of brings our walls down and allows us to be kind of human to human and connect with one another. So they wanted that in person. And so we created these awesome field days, which we hosted in New York and San Francisco and LA. But then the pandemic happened and all in-person events stopped. And, even to this point, most in-person events are not happening anymore, especially for companies because they are much more risk averse when it comes to the pandemic, and people aren't necessarily ready to come back with all their coworkers, but they do still need to connect with one another. So come January 2020, we had to completely reinvent and we took everything online. So because it was still very important for us to live our mission, which is, like I said, creating connection, building community through playful experiences. You can do that virtually. So we came together to figure out how to make that work.
And so, as an accounts manager, what was the toughest part for you?
I think the toughest part for me during that time, honestly, as an account manager, it was being able to guide clients, maybe not even just specifically around events, but just how folks want to be engaged during that time. I think one reason that we were able to pivot the way that we were was because we are so relationship oriented and we think about company culture more than we think about the output of the event. Like the event itself is always it's important and it's helping us create the outcomes of connection. But taking a step back and thinking about the culture of the organization and how people are experiencing the pandemic and their lives on a day-to-day basis is so important to be able to then give any kind of advice. So I think taking that step back as an account manager and thinking like, what would I want to hear as an employee? Like if I was in their shoes, as well as like if I'm the client and I'm the company and I'm leading my people, like what am I going through? Like, so many of the people we work with, we're now saddled with all of these new responsibilities, whether it be closing down an office or like having to be a new virtual events host and create trivia games. Like, people that were our clients were having to work 3 times the jobs they were working before. So really considering and being a shoulder for them in that was really important to us.
Yeah, it's like all of a sudden we all became podcasters. Like we were
I
forced to do
know.
that, plan the script on how to talk to our employees or our
Yes.
friends.
Yeah, we're all game hosts now. Like, it's just a totally different role, and some people aren't as comfortable with that. And we're expecting them to be technical hosts, MCs, game providers, producers. Like, there's so many things that we're like kind of shouldered by the folks who are our clients. And so that was the biggest thing for me, was thinking about how can I be there for them in that? Because there's a lot of things they don't know how to do. And also, frankly, I and my team was figuring out how to do too, and could give a lot of advice out of our own experience.
Yeah, so I think one of the hardest things for us as a virtual events production company was really learning how to manage both our team and the team across the screen, and their expectations on how, like, do we do technical fixes if something goes wrong? Do you keep going or do you stop and fix it? So it really does make a big difference being in person versus being virtually, and
Yeah.
how you troubleshoot team activities. So, which brings me to the next question: is how do you think using our virtual capacity right now can help a company be better, improve culture, improve the environment that they have in their company?
Hmm. Well, to be honest, I think in some ways virtual makes connecting with people easier than ever. Like, there's two sides of the coin of this. Like, there's the piece of being in an office physically and being able to walk up to your neighbor or walk by your neighbor and say something and have a casual conversation. Like, a lot of that is lost in the virtual world because the casual conversation is harder to have because you get onto a meeting and it's immediately business. But with all that being said, there's also much more opportunity to meet with people who you may have never had the opportunity to talk to before. Maybe you worked in a building that's a multi-floor building that you would have never crossed paths with somebody in your engineering department if you're in sales. But that opportunity is now here, and it's something that you can take advantage of. So I even think of, we work with a client who they're a retailer, and they're a global retailer actually, but they host this massive forum every year where they bring everybody in person, who are all their like top sales associates and they're leaders of their retail outlets and stores. And they always used to do this, and they did it with us. They were forced to do it virtually. And their biggest outcome after that event was they said to us, we got more feedback saying that they met more people and engaged with more people during this virtual event than they've ever met at another of our in-person events. And they were floored by that. They're like, people felt more connected than ever. And it was because we created these intentional moments where people were put into a breakout room with people they'd never met, and they had a prompt and they were just, go for it. Talk to somebody,
Yeah.
make that connection. And then they have this newfound connection that they can tap into. If maybe this store is having this problem, they're like, oh, I'm going to reach out to my friends in Florida and see what they think about this. Like, so that's the opportunity of this space that we live in now, is like, you can build culture amongst many groups that maybe you just didn't have the same level of access or just didn't think to have access to before.
Yeah, I know as a salesperson myself, being in a conference setting, whenever you go to these big summits or these big conferences every year, we attend them all the time.
Yeah.
The hardest part is building intentional relationships and like finding the right person to talk to about whatever
Mm-hmm.
it is you need to talk to. There's so many people at that conference hall at any given point in time of the day that it's like, okay, who am I supposed to talk to?
Where do I start?
Who where do I start, right? And you have to be a bit more intentional networking in the virtual space. But it really helps having the prompts that we put up all the time. It gets people going, little icebreakers. And yeah, so I think that's something that we've learned. It's about having the intention in terms of networking online, and I mean, I think it's helped. It's helped a lot of salespeople more than it has hurt them.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a way it's almost democratized the ability of people to network. So anybody has much more access to multiple different people that they maybe would have thought to before, because you can reach out to anyone and knock on the door, and maybe they say yes to a meeting, maybe they say no, but they're all out there, and we all have easy ways, and we all know how to use things like Zoom and other tools now that really weren't in our part of our daily working lives before.
Yeah, especially like moms and dads or people with other people at home who they have to take care of. Like, of course, I would love
Caretakers.
to visit South by Southwest, but I really can't take a whole week off of my
Mhm,
duties at home. But I could
mhm.
do it while I'm at home. So I think that's really good.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And which brings me to my next point, right? So we're building better connections with uh, people outside our work. How are teams getting better? Do you think that they are benefiting from the extra time on the screen, or they're being hurt by it?
Well, I think this all has to do with how companies and leaders, like, how they help their employees to design their day, and how they also like inform that piece. So there's definitely a downside. There's it's like a bell curve, I think of it. So to a certain point, technology can enable us to work really well together. And then there gets a point where it's the whole the Zoom fatigue, which I feel like that's a regular part of our nomenclature now, is like video and Zoom fatigue, because the act of seeing yourself and performing on a day-to-day basis, like when you're working with your teams, is exhausting. I don't know if I just broke up there, which is funny that I'm from a virtual events company. I'm having Wi-Fi issues. But I think the opportunity is for teams to work stronger together, in that they have this time where they can do their work however working is best for them. And like making sure that people have the time to do that is like grade A critical, that folks aren't just jumping from meeting to meeting to meeting because it seems important that they're meeting with everyone. Like, that's ultimately, you're not working if all you're doing is meeting. So ensuring that folks have time to do that. But if they do, and they can work in the way that's best for them, and they can like work with people from wherever they're working, I think teams can work better together, because ultimately each of us knows ourselves best, and we can self-direct what's going to be the best way for us to work. And if we can bring our best selves to work in that way, then like the team is only made up of each individual, and each individual at their best can help raise up the team. So there's a lot of, I think, virtual working tools that can support us in that, whether it's something like video technology or project management tools, that can help a virtual team be much more efficient, and still work together in a good way.
Yeah.
And things that are also like, our whole thing is about culture. So I know with my team, something we always do is like we start the meeting with something kind of silly. Like we have huddles every week, once a week, multiple times a week actually. But like one main huddle, for example, with my product team, and every single meeting we start with something different. So maybe we'll do like a stretch. It's not about anything. It's just like, let's stand up and you can turn your camera off and we're all going to move for a minute. Or maybe we start with, like, we call it a connection question. It's our big thing. We're going to start with a connection question. For example, like, what's one thing that made you smile today? And the thing that made you smile could be your cup of coffee. It could be an interaction with a client that was really positive. It could be that you solved this problem that you've been thinking about for weeks. It could be that, you took a walk and you haven't taken a walk for a while. Like, it could be anything. So having those intentional moments, I think, as a leader too, of like setting the tone, like we can have casual conversation too, and then we'll work. I think that's really important.
Yeah, definitely. I had an interview yesterday, And the person who I was having an interview with told me she is typically really shy, and in group settings, she tends to listen more than
Mhm.
she speaks up. And what working virtually has allowed her to do with her team is really like, we have the ability to raise our hands. We can speak up at a given certain time. She has worked better now with her group than she had ever before, because she knows when it's the right time to step in. She knows that it's okay for her to raise her hand instead of speak up, because it's expected that we raise our hands, and ask our questions or provide our feedback. So for her, in a situation where she's in person, it's a bit more awkward to be in a group setting. Whereas virtually, she's been able to thrive and gotten promoted, because of her ability to thrive in the virtual setting. So I really think it has helped some people.
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, there's always, again, like I feel like the theme of this conversation is there's the good and the bad. Like there's some people which I'm sure they're struggling a lot more in this space, but there's other people it's allowing maybe the introvert to thrive in other ways. Even like the ability to make the conscious decision, like I'm going to be video off today, but I'm still going to be contributing via the chat, or I'm going to contribute, in other ways. We have all these different tools that we can be collaborating with each other, maybe without like being the most obvious, like right in front of you, I'm here in an office sitting at your desk situation.
Yeah, yeah. So my next question for you is, how do we use our current situation to, how do we make it better? How do
Hmm.
we improve the current teams that we have?
That's such a hard question. How do we improve the teams as they currently? I mean, to me,
Virtually.
virtually. Uh, to me, this question is so it's so dependent on who your team is. Like, it's really something that as leaders, I think you have to ask your team what they're looking for. And yes, like oftentimes I think people will give you answers across the spectrum and they have all different ideas of what they think they want. And you can often, kind of hone those things in to what probably is going to be the best amalgamation of all those things. But number one recommendation or thing I would say there is people know what's best for them. So trusting the team. I also, I think it's really important to bring a level of like your authentic self to work. Like I don't think you need to 100% be like you like the full you all the time. Like there is a work persona and a home persona, and I'm comfortable with those two things being different things, but being able to be like open and honest about, I have this thing going on at home, and the workplace being flexible enough to say, okay, if you need to take this hour or so for yourself in the morning to do something, go ahead and do it, because we know that you'll be better after it's done. That to me is really the biggest opportunity for this kind of virtual working world, is allow people to take those things off their plate so that they can be 100% with you during the time they need to be there. Like maybe the 40, this is controversial opinion and I'm not 100% sure where I stand on it yet, but maybe the 40-hour work week isn't exactly what we all need. you know Potentially that was something that was created for the working world when we were on assembly lines, and like it was much more like command and control, but potentially people can work in different ways now and they still get their job done. And depending on the type of person they are and the type of work that they're doing, the focus that they can put in is more effective in, say, like 2-hour bursts, or like a day burst and then taking a day off. Because I think there's also power in like absence of work, and that to be able to build creativity, as well as people having opportunity to do things outside of their work to bring in inspiration from other pieces of their life. I find that to all be very positive. So I think that's how we can make teams thrive even more in this time, is like allowing people to bring their own personal flair to work, by whether it be, taking their kids to soccer and being the soccer coach, or the room mom, or having that volunteer job that they never had the time to do because they were spending most of that time commuting. Like there's new time that's available to people, or reading that book that they never got the time to do because they were spending time running around. Those things are also valuable, and they make us like more whole individuals. And that's what I'm talking about, like bringing yourself to work. If you can bring that, that's going to make the team stronger.
I wholeheartedly agree on that. I mean, any break that I'm able to take throughout the day, it automatically refreshes my mind, and it
Yeah.
gives me a burst of energy right when I come back. That I'm like, okay, I'm ready to get started on this new project. I could do this because I have the clarity of my mind is there. I got fresh air. I saw the sun. I'm not a
Yeah.
vampire anymore. I'm ready
Yeah.
to go. And I think that's really good. It's funny that you say that, because when we were going to work, commuting to work every day, spending an hour going and an hour coming back, we had to find that extra time in our work schedule to do those passionate events or those passionate things that we have in our lives. And now it's like, oh, I don't have a meeting. I can probably read a book. Oh, I don't have a meeting. I could probably go into a workshop at that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all these experiences that we're now able to take, all they're doing is providing and creating more creativity in our workplace, giving us the ability to contribute to our daily work efforts and projects.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's my perspective. And to go back to what you said about the 35 to 40 hour work week, is where I currently stand is maybe we don't need to work 35 hours a day, 35 hours a week or 40 hours a week. Maybe it's better that you work, get the project done, clear your mind, and get on to the next project. Like a lot of the times, most employees aren't even working the entire 35, 40 hours a week. They're doing water cooler talks, they're, twiddling their fingers and just waiting for another email to come in to their inbox, and then get on that job. But where they can be creating something, they could be thinking about a passion project, or thinking about a new idea for the business. I think that this really helps.
For sure. And I think to be able to even offer that, companies, I believe, have to have like set the tone and set the culture that they're open to that type of expression and feedback and like creativity within their workforce, that they want people to be thinking outside the box and bringing new ideas. And that's like setting a tone for the entire company, which I think is very positive. But it's harder for some companies to be able to do, who maybe historically don't have the legacy of that within their business.
Definitely. So, going back to talking about passions, what have you been doing that's passion based, or what have you done in your free time now that we're virtual?
Yeah, now that I'm virtual, I feel it's been such a gift for me as like for individual growth. During this time, I've been able to spend more time with my family first and foremost. Like that's been such a gift. I've also been able to like finally volunteer, like for the first time in a long time. I've been able to volunteer for an organization that I really care about in the DC area, where I'm a crisis support advocate, which is really important to me. And then I also have been able to, I started a podcast with my mom. And so my mom and I talk about all different, we have a podcast called Mothers and Daughters Unfiltered. And we talk about different issues that affect women from an intergenerational lens. So I take it from my millennial lens. She takes it from her baby boomer lens. And we talk to all different interesting women about their life experiences and different issues affecting women. So that's been a lot of fun for me too, because I love, I'm in client services. That's kind of how I started. And I love talking to people and learning about them and learning what makes them tick. And so it's really fun for me to be able to share that with her, because I think I learned that talking from her. So it's fun.
So what have you learned in the creation of this podcast from your mom about how this is affecting other generations, or particularly her
Mm.
generation?
Yeah, that's such a good question. We actually had a whole series of podcasts in the beginning of the pandemic, which we called our like COVID-19 series, where we were interviewing different women of all different scenarios. So we like college women, women who maybe like were abroad and had to come home, teenagers, like so Gen Zers who were being affected by this, and then also like mothers and daughters. So for example, like there's a lot of younger people, millennials, who had to move home or decided to move home because maybe they were furloughed from their jobs, or they lost their jobs, so they moved back with their parents. And yeah, that affects the millennial, but that also affects their parents. That actually happened to me at the beginning of the pandemic. I kept my work with Zog throughout, but we had a time when it was really like panic mode. The company, there's two sides of the companies. There's the sports side of the business, which is there are social sporting leagues, Zog Sports, and then there's the culture side of the business, which Zog Culture. We basically used to do were these in-person events, and so it was panic mode. What are we going to do? And so they did the smart business decision, and they furloughed most of the workforce because they knew there was no work coming up in the next couple of months. So I had to move home with my parents.
Man,
Yeah, and it was also, my younger brother was just graduating college. There was lots of reasons for me to go back, but uh that's affected how they live their day-to-day lives, and like their generation, they had a lot of friends who had that situation where their kids are moving back, and they were like, my kids are fully grown and have flown the nest, and now we have them back here with us all the time. And like
oh
at
my
first
God,
it's
get
like
out of my space.
fun, so fun, like movie night, game night, but then it's like, wait, no, we're like four grown adults all living in one space. Like, this is insane. um but I think, as the time has gone on, that was really the beginning, and we're all now settled in our own spaces. I think with her generation, the hardest thing has been like, you know, comfort, like going out into the world and like being able to regain like social ties in person, and also like having to figure out the technology hurdle with all of this. you know my mom is like, she's pretty tech savvy. Like, it's very funny, we're always trying to like figure things out together of how to work together remotely, but now she's like gotten it together. But for someone who's not as comfortable with technology, it's a very isolating time.
Yeah.
Really isolating. Like, there's so many great things that have come out of this for people who have, the access, the funds, and the ability to be able to be online. But for those who are not, you have to think about your neighbors and folks who are sitting at home and haven't been able to see their grandkids or their kids for 18 months now. That's extremely
Yeah,
sad.
it's pretty tough. Pretty tough. So Natalie, we're coming up at the end of our session. If you had one or two sentences, can you please describe how does how do virtual events make life easier, and how does it make your team better? One or two sentences.
Okay. So how does it make it life easier and work better?
Either
Okay.
or.
All right. I believe that, and I said this in the beginning, play at work, play is the great unifier and equalizer. And if you can bring moments of play, whether it's 5 minutes, whether it's an hour-long event, to your team, and allow them to connect with each other on that kind of childlike level, then you will see people be able to open up a side of themselves and bring themselves to work in a different way. It's that small switch in the part of our brains that says, okay, I'm safe here, I'm comfortable here, I have psychological safety and belonging here. And so I can contribute in a whole new way. That's why I think they're important.
I wholeheartedly agree. Thank you for joining us today, Natalie. And thank you for your time. I
Thank you.
hope to talk to you soon.
Yeah, it was very fun to chat with you today, Pedro. I really appreciate it.
Same. Have a good one.
Awesome. You as well. Thank you.